Good afternoon. My name is William Ashford, and this is my TED-like talk for SWOK 705, Leading Public Discourse. Dr. T is my professor. I will be talking today about a better way. Runners, take your mark. Get set. Bang! For 2 years, I was the fastest boy in my school. I don't know how this started, but every day, Tracy and I would line up after school, tighten the straps of our book bags, and race down the long, winding path, across the basketball courts, across the playgrounds, past the monkey bars and the trees we would climb, especially that one big tree with the protruding branches, allowing us to hang upside down on warm spring and autumn days, to the front door of Miss Anita, our first and second grade after-school provider's house. Day after day, week after week, month after month, for 2 straight school years, I raced Tracy. And day after day, week after week, month after month, no matter how hard I pumped my arms and moved my legs, I lost to Tracy. For 2 years, I was the fastest boy in my school, but not the fastest kid in my school. It was infuriating that no matter how fast I ran, no matter how hard I tried, I could beat every kid in my school but Tracy. Runners, take your mark. Get set. Bang! That bang that many who live a life of privilege may recognize as the starter's gun to start a race is traumatizing to so many of us who grew up in less than desirable neighborhoods. I think about how blessed my children are, that whenever they hear a gunshot, they know to instinctively start running because they're trying to win a race. 2 bangs were an indication that a foul occurred and to come back to restart the race. But growing up, when I heard a bang, the first thing I did was duck. A second bang allowed me to identify the origins of the gunshot and to move as quickly and quietly and as safely as possible in a different direction where the prize was not a medal, but the opportunity to live another day. Runners, take your mark. Get set. Bang! That bang that many who live a life of privilege may recognize again as a starter's gun to start a race was a reminder to my mother that she had to work harder to get out of our apartment on Callow Avenue in West Baltimore. Simple luxuries that my children take for granted, such as calmly and casually building a snowman, or learning to ride a bike, were luxuries we could not afford. Playing outside was done with the cautiousness and alertness of the antelope grazing on the African plain with the pride of hungry lions lurking nearby. Bang, get in the house. Bang, stay away from the windows. Bang, no, you cannot go outside today. But luckily, Charlie's parents did not mind if we made our way to the lower floor of our apartment complex to run around his living room. Runners, take your mark. Get set. Bang, moving day. Thank God my mother finally saved up enough money to move off of Callow Avenue, out of West Baltimore, and all the way across town to Northeast Baltimore. We moved into a house on Wadsworth Way when I was 8. There was a yard, kids playing in the alley, and I could ride my bike up and down the block without fear of the local drug dealer, drug wars, or stray bullets. Maybe this is what George and Wheezy must have felt like when they moved to that deluxe apartment in the sky. I wouldn't be able to see Charlie as often, but it was an acceptable sacrifice to just be able to go outside and play. Runners, take your mark. Get set. Bang! Every gunshot that was fired at night forced my mother to make some impossible decisions. Do I buy enough food for one and a family of 2? Or eat but stay on Callow Avenue a little longer? It would be years before I was aware of the sacrifices that my mother made to move us out of poverty and to give me a fighting chance, but she believed that I was worth the investment. However, everyone doesn't win that rat race. What I've come to realize is that the exact maddening feeling I had every time Tracy touched that door before me is the feeling that many have who are unable to beat the social and economic environments that they were born into, manipulated into, forced into, jammed into. Your Honor, I knew it was wrong to steal from the grocery store, but we had no food to eat. Your Honor, I was only selling crack because my mom is working a double shift plus overtime on her second job because minimum wage and a livable wage are not synonymous, and she made just enough to keep the lights on and a roof over our head, but not enough to feed me and my 3 siblings. Your Honor, I did not want to commit that crime, but because the classrooms were overcrowded when I was growing up, my school was underfunded, and the inherent bias test required to get in college did not take into account people like me or the language that we speak. I did not get a good education. Your Honor, I did not want to do, but I felt like I had no other choices. Your Honor, if you've ever heard Grandmaster's Flash song, The Message, you would understand why I had weed in my system. So I'm begging you, don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. Ha 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 ha. It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under. How I keep from going under. The economy, the educational system, policies, politics, and society keeps touching this damn door before me. And the penalty for losing is devastating. Runners, take your mark. Get set, bang. I was one of the lucky ones to win a race that I did not even know I was involved in. But I rode my mother's coattails across the finish line. However, winning this rat race did not occur because my mother moved us out of West Baltimore. But she worked to build a village that would instill in me holistic and healthy growth. There was a heavy emphasis in my house on education. But the village that I'm talking about was my mom kept me involved in a wide variety of activities, from church to sports, to the arts, both music and drama, to the Boy Scouts, to etc., etc., etc. That every once in a while, I did not understand why I had to be a part of it, but it surrounded me with positive role models to combat the negative messages my former environs attempted to communicate, and it was such a time suck that I lacked the opportunity to engage in detrimental behaviors. My mind was being renewed. My eyes were being conditioned to see that there was truly a better way. We got out. I touched the door first. I actually won the race that so many of my peers, my uncles, my cousins, my family members lost. I won the gold medal of a lifestyle better than my mom had, and the opportunity to position my children for an even greater one. But what about those without a village? They were the ones who really lost. Their reward for being born into an environment that has them running 1,600 meters to win a 400-meter race was jail. Their reward for being born into an environment that had them running 1,600 meters to win a 400-meter race was a substandard education due to political gerrymandering and dollars being funneled to fully funded school districts to keep those with power in power. Their reward for being born into an environment that had them running 1,600 meters to win a 400-meter race was policies developed to create pockets of poverty and the false narrative of crime to justify police brutality. The reward for being born into an environment that had them running 1,600 meters to win a 400-meter race was jobs that paid minimum wage but not a livable wage. The reward for being born into an environment that had them running 1,600 meters to win a 400-meter race was going to school in a school district full of teachers who have become so apathetic and frustrated because they can't relate or communicate with the students they've been called to teach, and time again, they touch the door second because the village that had been designed to keep them safe and equip them to win has failed them. Runners, take your mark. Get set. Bang, if you've never had the opportunity to talk with those whom the village has failed, allow me the privilege of offering you some insight. Imagine, if you will, that you're having a discussion with a young man who's between the ages of 16 and 25. You are unsure of his exact age, but at that moment, it's really not that important. What has captivated your attention is this particular individual's intelligence, vivaciousness, energy, imagination, and creative ideas. On the surface, he appears to be no different than the intellectual young men at Morehouse College or Emory University or Villanova University or the University of Southern California. He appears to be no different than the young men who are full of potential at the elite private and or prep schools of your local community. In fact, as you talk to him, you realize that his potential is limitless. And although he was raised in the slums, the projects, and or the crime and drug infested communities of his local context, with right focus, his future is brighter than the aforementioned college men and high school boys. However, this individual and all the intangibles he embodies stands juxtaposed to his current social economic milieu. The initial thought is, if this young man changes his mentality, then he can successfully navigate the obstacles that stand between him and success. Unfortunately, this young man never developed the necessary tools required for societal status and standing, succumbing to his environment and landing in the penal system. These are the conversations I often engaged in while serving as a chaplain in either a drug rehab center in Atlanta, Georgia, or in the prisons in the Baltimore metropolitan area. This challenge of the school to prison pipeline is one that many urban leaders are aware of, and those invested in their communities are working to disrupt. This phrase describes a disturbing national trend wherein children are funneled out of public schools and enter the juvenile and criminal justice systems. Many of these children have learning disabilities or histories of poverty, abuse, or neglect, and would benefit from an additional education and counseling services. Instead, they're isolated, punished, and pushed out. It is the challenge of growing up as an underprivileged youth in an urban or inner city setting without being properly equipped with the social, economical, and or educational skills to remain out of the penal system. In African American barbershops, we call it growing up black. This very issue is my why. This very issue is my North Star. This very issue is the focus of this TED Talk today. This very issue is why I started this talk the way that I did. I once heard a phrase that states, what a man thinks about will become his words. What he speaks will become his actions. And what he does will ultimately define who he is. I mention this against the backdrop of the issues that I bring forth because we cannot overlook how one's environment impacts how one thinks. As I listen to the stories of those men, the crimes they committed, and their social influences, I concluded that many of these men were not criminals because they were bad people. They weren't thugs. But they really felt like they had no other options, which compromised their morals and their integrity. Pop artist Sean Carter, also known as Jay-Z, has a song, Say Hello, on his American Gangster album, in which he states, we ain't thugs for the sake of being thugs. Nobody do that where we grew at. Duh. The poverty line, we're not above. So out come the mask and glove because we ain't feeling the love. We ain't doing crime for the sake of doing crime. We moving dimes because we ain't doing fine. 1 out of 3 of us is locked up doing time. You know what kind of stuff that can do to a person's mind. Nathan McCall, in his book Makes Me Wanna Holler, says, I was struck with the sense that I was deeply involved in some things that were over my head. At the same time, I couldn't conceive of altering my course or turning back. Richard Wright gives us these words about what it means to be black or brown in America. The civilizations which had given birth to bigger contained no spiritual sustenance, had created no culture which could hold and claim his allegiance and faith, has sensitized him and left him stranded from his book, Native Son. The Bible says it like this: the things that I want to do, I do not do. And those things that I know I should not do, those are the things that I do. And Paul, as he concludes Romans chapter 7, says, "O wretched man am I." If art is a true reflection of life, then like many of the men I spoke with, Jay-Z, Nathan McCall, and Richard Wright gives further insight as to how a social and economic and cultural condition can influence thought and dictate actions and cause you to say, like the Bible says, "O wretched man am I." People are struggling to make it from one day to the next. and it has a profound effect on an individual's mode of thinking. If young people are going to ever successfully combat the negative and cultural influences of the world and break this school to prison pipeline, community-based organizations must proactively pick up the slack left by the educational system and at times the home environment. Communal leaders must change their mindset to develop a sensitivity to the people with whom they work, understanding that people are drastically shaped by the subtle nuances of their varying social contexts. Finally, the village must invest time and resources for the purposes of creating what Talib coins the Black Swan event and the life of youth that disrupts their flow into the penal system on the front end. Demonstrating a better way is more effective when the hearts and minds of people are shaped from a place of prevention opposed to reform, by a village that possesses genuine care and concern. When the village cares, young people have an opportunity to touch the door first. Runners, take your mark. Get set. Bang! So why do we need the village's help? Did you know that the war on drugs in the 1980s was really a war on poverty? As what we see as a mental health concern today landed minorities and the marginalized jail sentences up to 3 times as long as those of the affluent majority for similar infractions? Did you know that because the prison industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, many young people living in pockets of poverty and food deserts were targeted for arrest, creating the false narrative that poverty was synonymous with crime? Mass incarceration evolved from being a tool used to keep society as a whole safe from those that are truly dangerous to an instrument used to deal with the issues of poverty, inequality, unemployment, racial and political conflict, illegal immigration and citizenship, sexuality and gender identification. Did you know that Black people are arrested and incarcerated at a clip 5 times the amount of their white counterparts, and brown people 1.4 times the amount while committing similar crimes? Did you know that the school to prison pipeline is a system that targets marginalized and economically challenged members of society living in educationally underfunded and high crime communities? So instead of addressing youth mental health, emotional, educational, social, economical, and behavioral concerns and or challenges for the purposes of holistically developing productive citizens of society, the school to prison pipeline ignores the mitigating factors that produce criminals and just funnels them into prisons and or jails. Did you know that an additional diabolical use of mass incarceration is to increase political power by removing individuals from their place of origin and incarcerating them in other areas to increase political clout? This form of political gerrymandering uses people as pawns to increase electoral college clout without concerns for the welfare of those being transferred across state lines or the children impacted by this parental void. Mass incarceration was weaponized to keep those empowered, but also to provide economic and political power for the private sector. Did you know that the U.S. Department of Education reported that national spending on prisons and jails far exceeded the spending on the educational system, suggesting that national spending is a reflection of national values? But finally, did you know that a 10% increase in high school graduation will result in a 9% decrease in an arrest rate, and that Black men between the ages of 20 and 24 who do not know how to read have a higher chance of being arrested? Why do we need the village's help? Because this is a bit much for an adult to overcome, let alone a 5 and 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 12-year-old child who is being targeted for the penal system, especially when combined with the degrading environment that he or she is born into. However, healthy youth development in impoverished communities does not lie squarely on the shoulders of the educational system. Disrupting the school to prison pipeline is most effective when we, those of us with privilege and power and influence, invest in young people, giving them the tools to properly address their challenges while simultaneously offering them healthy life alternatives that may significantly differ from their current societal milieu. The Family Center Treatment Foundation suggests that components of family therapy, emotionally focused therapy, and positive peer support based in the community has the ability to disrupt offensive trajectories. The thought is that a positive environment and sustained positive outcomes can significantly reduce the number of youth that have the potential of entering the school to prison pipeline. The challenge, however, is to ensure that the community-based organizations are champions for youth development and growth that have the capacity to challenge the negative environments where many of the youth may reside. The village approach of healthy youth development as a method of disrupting the school to prison pipeline is born out of the concept of investing in our children and investing in our future. In 2016, former U.S. Secretary of Education John B. King Jr. stated that far too long, systems in this country have continued to perpetuate inequality. We must choose to make more investments in our children's future. We need to invest more in prevention than in punishment, to invest more in schools, not in prisons. Runners, take your mark. Get set. Bang! What I've learned is that winning this race means that understanding that I can be the product of my village without being the product of my environment. The question becomes, if my village and environment differ, which one will have the greater influence on my life? Again, many people who fill prisons and jails, who are repeat offenders of petty crimes, are not inherently evil or bad, but those who just had to go into survival mode. What is survival mode? I'm glad you asked. Survival mode is when you do not have access to the educational, social, and or economical resources to become productive citizens and society. To combat the effects of survival mode, we must learn as a culture and as a society to hit the following 3 targets. Repeat these words after me. Be proactive, develop prevention, and become productive. Being proactive requires us to carefully examine the etymology of criminal activity among youth for the purposes of developing social, economical, and educational preventative measures early. Developing prevention becomes critical because it is much easier to build productive adults than it is to repair broken ones. Becoming productive citizens in society occurs when we have proactively developed preventative measures in the lives of the disenfranchised and impoverished young people that includes providing equitable access to necessary resources. Healthy and holistic growth is more than just physical development. It means that every aspect of a young person's need are being met either in the home, by the educational system, or the community at large. Every person truly interested in the village, genuinely concerned with healthy youth development, and has a desire to proactively disrupt the school to prison pipeline must learn to join their village efforts in one of 2 ways. Number 1, get involved. Become a mentor. Become a volunteer. Find your local community center, faith-based organization, or grassroots organization and ask this question, what can I do to help? Help us serve those who have been unfairly underserved. Number 2, become invested. Donate a financial gift towards those efforts of those who are providing resources and programming to young people who have been deprived access to what is required for healthy and holistic youth development. Every youth deserves the opportunity to access the resources required to become productive citizens. Join us as we proactively develop preventative measures to disrupt the school to prison pipeline and offer hope to those who may feel hopeless because of what they have been denied. Runners, take your mark, get set, bang! Thank you very much.